Hello, everyone. Thank you, Amber, to be our facilitator, and thank you all to join our section today. We have 25 minutes today, but we have a lot of content, so I will speak a little faster. If there's anything you don't understand or you have any question, please just pop in the chat and we will address that later or repeat a little bit. So welcome to our section again. Our section today is we were talking about enhanced student-centered learning with boost and engagement and alleviate anxiety by using H5P-rich OER. I'm Daphne Tseng. I'm from Air University, and come with me today is Theresa Huff. She's from LMU. So let's go into our, in this section, we will cover two studies. We have two-stage study about the whole presentation. We will cover two studies. The first one we actually presented on this year, April earlier, is more like a general study to see how difference with H5P embedded Pressbook instructional material different learning outcome with no H5P embedded instructional material. So here we have, Theresa, would you please drop in that our webpage there? We have our more detail about the first one in the webpage. So please feel free to hop on that webpage while I was briefly talking about that. So that first one is improving engagement and motivation by applying active learning using H5P in OER Pressbook. So we kind of like we pick the COM 101, a certain a specific topic, one lesson topic in the Pressbook platform, and we create two versions. One is just regular static OER content, and the other version is we didn't change the content, but we add more H5P elements in there. So we wanted to know, our study research question is, can using H5P-rich OER in a synchronous online environment reading platform increase learners' engagement with the content and their motivations? And at this point, I would like to shout out with Dr. Virginia Clinton Lysol, OER Open Education Fellowship Group, and she actually the fellowship sponsor us to have this study on the Perfilix survey platform. If you could, Theresa, please help us to put OER Research Fellows program link there, so you can see what is that whole fellowship is doing. And that just our sponsor here. Thank you for them. And with all the study, our process is we have two groups. Follow with what I say earlier. There's one is with H5P and one is without H5P. So we have 292 participants, and they kind of got almost equally apart for two different versions. The process that is, they go through the pre-knowledge check, answer 5 questions about the content before they read the whole material, and then they be separated to two parts. A group get H5P embedded instructional material, and B group got non-H5P, just regular text instructional material. And then after they read through the whole thing, they come back, finish the post-test, and then they submit their result for that. So on that part, we compare the pre and post test, and also we use John Kelly's instructional material motivation survey. Theresa, please drop the link here. And then that's the survey. Survey has a couple 5 characters they were looking for, how the instructional material can motivate the students' learning. On that part, we not only compare the pre and post test, we also compare with the two groups when they answer the IMMS survey instruments difference. So for the next slide, we were briefly talk about what we were finding, and you can definitely find more information on our webpage. So on that 5 characteristics they were looking for, 4 of them have the significant higher score on the motivation, satisfaction, relevance, and the knowledge gain parts. They do see the difference here, but the attention and confidence part, we didn't see a significant significant here. And also there are not statistically significant difference in learning when comparing the average score of the entire knowledge test, which the knowledge test we have the pre and post of those using the Pressbook with H5P compares Pressbook without H5P. However, when we were looking at the individual questions, 2 of the 5 knowledge check questions did show statistically significant increase their score for those who use Pressbook with the H5P. So again, we need to do more studies in this because they're just really a general survey out for certain H5P types improve learning more than others. So that's lead to our next research is our second phase research. I will give the floor to Theresa.
Great, thank you, Daphne. This study built on our previous study. We found when we were studying about motivation and satisfaction and engagement, we started thinking about maybe this can apply to other affective domains like anxiety. We're seeing an increase in anxiety among learners, particularly college students in the US and elsewhere. And we know that there's a negative correlation between anxiety and learner achievement. So when your anxiety goes up, your achievement tends to go down. We also have a bunch of new technologies, methods of teaching, new course design complexities that online learning have brought into the place of teaching. And so when we look back to see what research has been done, there's not a lot about anxiety specific to the design of a course or course materials. Something else we know is that Mayer's multimedia principles can be applied to manage cognitive load, and it's been shown to improve learning performance, but also affect things like motivation, engagement, satisfaction, like we just saw in our previous study. And so we wondered if that would work with anxiety as well. For our 2 questions we were trying to ask was, how does applying 4, we only picked 4 multimedia principles, using H5P images affect the anxiety of adult online learners? And then because there's not a lot of research out there, the second question is an open-ended question. What other factors are affecting adult online learner anxiety? This is specific to the course design or the course material. So this was a qualitative instead of quantitative like our first study. This is a qualitative study that's phenomenological in its approach because we're trying to explore people's experiences. We weren't really looking for statistical significance here. We're looking for more exploratory. The 4 multimedia principles we applied were segmenting, generative activities principle, feedback principle, and the emotional design principle. And if you don't know what those are, don't worry, I'm going to go through them in just a little bit. But we applied these 4 principles in 6 different scenarios of instruction. So this time, different than our first study, we applied them in 1 Pressbook, 6 different scenarios, and each scenario has an A version. This one is just the original text, and a B version that has not all of them are A without text, B with some of them are a B has just the text. So it's not always A versus B. You'll see that in a bit. Other scenario had the H5P applying one of these multimedia principles or sometimes 2. That's what it looked like in the tool. We, this time, because it's qualitative, just had 50 US online college students, age 18 to 65, and they were given a link to each of these scenarios one at a time, and then asked these 2 questions after each scenario. So which scenario made you feel less overwhelmed, anxious, or uneasy? And they could choose A, B, neither, or both. And then that open-ended question was the second question. What was it that made you feel more or less anxious? And from that second question, then we coded and looked for themes to emerge. So the first principle was segmenting, and segmenting is based on the idea that we know that research shows that our working memory can only hold, it's limited, it can only hold about 7 new pieces of simple information at a time, give or take 2. before it gets overloaded. And if it's complex information, it's even less information that can hold at a time. So segmenting is essentially chunking or breaking large pieces of information into smaller bite-sized pieces, and that helps to keep the learner's working memory from getting overloaded. And so we wondered if that would help reduce their anxiety too. So we applied this using the H5P accordion on the left. It's the exact same text on both scenarios, but in the one with the H5P accordion, the quote itself is hidden from view. It's a visual break. And so there's less text on the page, and the learner can control the amount of information by selecting the arrow on the left and then hide it as well. The other place we applied this was in the H5P course presentation. So on the left is the original, and we replaced the last two paragraphs in scenario B with a H5P course presentation, same information, but it's learner controlled using the slide controls at the bottom, and it breaks up the page a little bit more. How did our participants perceive these? Did it lower their anxiety? And our initial results said that with the H5P accordion, the plurality said that it did lower their anxiety. And notice that not everyone felt that. There's a variety of emotions here, but the largest group of the four said that it did lower their anxiety or their feeling of overwhelm. With the H5P course presentation, we had a majority say it did lower their anxiety. Still a variety of emotions here. Some felt that neither or both relieved their anxiety, but we do have a majority saying that this tool, applying this principle, did lower their anxiety. So when we looked at the second question, what was it that caused or relieved their anxiety? There were three themes that emerged using the segmenting principle, and the first had to do with the amount of text on the page. This participant said when they were looking at the original text, looking at all the text made it more stressful. And the second theme that came to light was that it had to do with the perceived time it would take to read or complete the instruction. So with the H5P course presentation, this participant said, how the text within our activity was portrayed made me feel I was going to finish reading in no time. And then the final one was the amount of control they had that affected their anxiety levels. So this participant said the option to view extra text at my own discretion and pace made me less overwhelmed. And that was when we were talking about the H5P accordion. So that was interesting, but what might this imply for those of us who are designing instruction? A few things to potentially take away here. First of all, you should use segmenting. Of all four multimedia principles we applied here, this one had the largest impact of the four. Both the H5P accordion and H5P course presentation worked really well for this. Of course, more research should always be done, but it seems like it's a really good principle to apply. Secondly, use small chunks of text. It seemed like there was a lot of anxiety from online learners when they first experienced the learning materials and they first came to that page. They saw a lot of text on the page. It clearly overwhelmed them, and that made them feel like it might take a long time to complete it. So putting smaller chunks of text on the page or breaking it up inside your material is key to lowering your anxiety in your students. And then finally, where possible, allowing for the learner to control the pace or the amount of information they see in the content. That also helped reduce their anxiety. The second principle we applied was the generative activities principle, and it states that the cognitive load is better managed when the learners have the opportunity to practice with the new content before they try to take in more new content. So essentially, it's ensuring that learners have time and activities to process and move that new information into the long-term memory. So we use the H5P interactive video to apply this principle. We place short review questions throughout the video. The learners would watch a little bit of the video and then it would pause, and this review question would pop up and review the content that they had just learned before they continued on with the video. So it gives them practice. And the other place we applied this was in this fifth scenario. We used the H5P quiz, and rather than giving a long list of static review questions like you see on the left, that's typically at the end of a chapter, instead on the right, we replaced it with an interactive review of the exact same questions, but they can practice to see if they really know the answers and really know the content. So how did this affect our learners? Oh, before I do that, this same two interactions are the ones we use to apply the feedback principle. Feedback states that cognitive load is better managed when the learners are provided information or feedback during their instruction instead of later or not at all. And that helps them evaluate and correct their understanding of the content. So the generative activities gives you a chance to practice, The feedback, specifically if it does not just say correct or incorrect, but has explanations in it, helps them understand not just do I know or not know this, but why it's a correct or incorrect answer. So we applied this, and again, in the interactive video, you can embed, you can see that in blue, some feedback for the students when they answer the question. And also in the H5P quiz, you can see in blue, they get a little bit more feedback as they practice. So another layer of learning there. All right, so how did how did our participants perceive these in relation to their anxiety? So interesting here, we didn't seem to reduce anxiety with the H5P interactive video application of generative activities. If you look at these numbers, it almost looks like maybe it's causing anxiety. So we'll look more at the reasoning for this in a minute, but almost a majority, 48%, said that they prefer the original video because it seemed to reduce their anxiety more than the H5P. So we'll look at that more in a minute. However, with the H5P quiz, we found that there was a plurality of participants that said it lowered their anxiety. So it's very similar practice, but for some reason, this interaction lowered their anxiety more than the H5P interactive video. So what's going on here? When we looked at the open-ended answers, 3 themes emerged. The first one was whether or not they felt like they were interrupted. So this participant said, I wasn't a fan of how 3B interrupted the video to ask me questions. And so it seemed like participants that mentioned being interrupted felt like their attention was interrupted, and that really caused anxiety rather than relieving it. And then the second theme that emerged was whether or not it felt like a quiz. So there's a lot of assessment anxiety. In this participant said, quizzes just generally inspire anxiety. We'll talk more about what this might mean in the implications. And then the final theme was whether or not they felt that they could self-assess using the activity. This participant said, the questions allowed me to determine if I was absorbing the information correctly, overall reducing the anxiety that comes from learning. That was with both interactions as well. So what might this imply? When applied thoughtfully, the generative activities principle does seem to reduce anxiety, but you'll want to consider particularly where you, especially like in a video, where you place the practice so that it doesn't interrupt their train of thought or their attention. And the second thing we might learn from this is that since the review questions seem to invoke a feeling of a test, it would help to explicitly state the presence of a practice question that's going to be popping up in the video, and that's just for practice, it's not graded, or that it's low stakes, but to tell them what to expect in the instructions. And then it also might be that there could be a better H5P that doesn't feel like a test. For example, in our examples that we had for our participants, we use multiple choice questions and true false, which are common on exams. So there may be a better one like a drag and drop or something like that, or a game map that doesn't feels more like a game than a test, potentially. And then the third one would be that the generative activities is about allowing practice. So letting them repeat and practice without penalty or grading would be the best way to reduce their anxiety. When we looked at the feedback principle themes, there were 2 things that emerged. The first had to do with whether or not the instruction made the participant feel more confident. This participant said, scenario A, which was the text alone, makes me feel overwhelmed because I do not feel confident in correctly answering the questions in the text. Or scenario B, which was the H5P quiz, is better because I can check my answers. And the second thing had to do with whether or not the instruction helped them comprehend and improve their understanding. So this participant said the scenario 5A, which was just the text alone on the page, was hard to follow and overwhelming. There was also no way to learn from the questions since there was no answer key. So those 2 themes are interesting. What might that imply? It might imply that we should always use explanatory feedback to help our learners feel confident, not just correct or incorrect when they answer an interactive quiz or pop-up quiz, but why the answer is correct or incorrect. That can help increase their confidence and understanding. The second thing, for the best chance of supporting comprehension, to make that feedback immediately available by pairing it, embedding it with that generative activity. So right after they practice, they get the feedback. Otherwise, they might lose the connection between the 2. The final thing is to make the practice repeatable without penalty. And I see that we've only got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to quickly move on. The emotional design principle. And basically, you can read all of this if we run out of time on our websites that are at the end of this. But it's essentially knowing how to, it posits that if you can induce a emotion in the learner that can either negatively or positively affect their learning. And so the way we apply this, you can apply it using things like audio, sounds, colors, images. So we applied H5P audio here. In addition to the text quote, they also can push play and hear audio of a human voice saying that quote. And this was for a speech class. It's a chapter from a speech, a chapter on how to give a speech. So that might be useful. And then the second way we applied it is by using warm colored rounded images, which there is some research out there that shows that those two things more than cold colors and angular images reduces anxiety. So we found that there was a plurality of participants that said the audio helped lower their anxiety, but varied here, not a lot of difference in one or the other. And then the second one with the images, they're warm and round, not as much difference here. More participants actually thought that the warm round colored images were reduced their anxiety than the other, but most felt, like a majority felt, that neither one made that big of a difference. So here you can look very quickly at what the takeaways were from the students. They felt like if it reinforced their learning and engaged them, the audio did relieve their anxiety. And if the colors were warm and had a cohesive style, it did lower their anxiety. So implications: apply it if you have time. Make sure you use it to reinforce the content and not distract from the content, and plan thoughtfully your aesthetic. Okay, and I'm going to leave it there. You can go back and look at these last overall themes that we pulled from all of the feedback we got from faculty or from the participants. But I'm going to hand it back to Daphne.
Okay.
Daphne, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I'm okay. So I'll quickly run through the rest of the slides. You can see our reference either on our webpage or on our upload slides PDF. If you need more information, please reach out to us, and we love to continue, because we find out, although this is kind of like an old topic, but with the new technology and new things put in, we can have a lot of interesting find out and resolve for case by case with different material or something like that. So I'll back to the floor for open questions.
I had a question about how can I learn about H5P. I think we dropped earlier a link to H5P. You can certainly go to h5p.org and learn all about it. I am an H5P ambassador, which means nothing other than I get to see some of the first H5Ps coming out. I don't get paid or anything by that. But if you'd like to read, I'd love to walk through H5P with you and all the ins and outs and how to build with that. I'm happy to do that. I don't think we have time to do a quick overview, but again, if you go to h5p.org and click on the examples, you can see lots of them and play with them yourselves. But feel free to reach out. I'd love to share more.
And thank you, Amber. That's a great thing. Maybe we can get together and divide and conquer, have another presentation talking about instructors' perspective here.
Thanks, everyone, for your wonderful feedback.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening or afternoon.
I will find you guys